Thank you for tuning in to MacroView Television and welcome to a brand new edition of Taiwan Outlook, the program that presents the different faces and let you hear their stories on Taiwan. I'm your host, Ray Guo. What is digital healthcare and how can it help Taiwan in dealing with an increasingly aging population? We're going to find out on today's program because we're delighted to have as our special guest Dr. Chris Fang, who's currently the Chief Advisor of Acer Healthcare Business and also the founder of MEDx Life, to talk about the prospects of biotechnology and healthcare industry in Taiwan. Welcome to our program, Dr. Fang.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be on Taiwan Outlook today, and thank you for inviting me to be on your program.
Yeah, well, it's a pleasure to have you on the program. And first of all, Dr. Fan, would you mind spending some time telling us a little bit about yourself? For example, were you born in Taiwan, and where did you go to school? And how was your career developing in the last few years?
Certainly. When I look back at my academic and professional career,
yes,
I don't think I could have planned it that way. It's a quite
I don't think
unique.
many people could. And were you born in Taiwan?
Yes, I was born in Taiwan, and I actually went to elementary school here. But I was not academically especially strong. In fact, I was a fairly poor student. I actually failed first grade. I had to go to first grade twice.
That's not easy to do, failing first grade.
I had to try hard, but I managed to do that. But I did manage to graduate from elementary school.
Good.
But I was fortunate that I moved to the United States when I was 12. Okay. And at that time, I didn't speak a word of English. So I naturally gravitated toward music. Because I was passionate about music. I studied
It's a universal language, yes?
Yeah, it's a universal language because when I didn't speak a word of English, I was able to communicate with other people. I was able to find my self-esteem. I was able to establish myself as a musician in a foreign land in many ways. So I gravitate toward music. In fact, actually majoring in music in college. But at the same time, I knew in the back of my head that I wanted to do something more than music. So I studied music, knowing the fact that I could get a degree fairly easily and graduate in music. But at the same time, I was looking out for other opportunities because I'm thinking about what else could I do to make a bigger impact in other people's lives. And so I thought about what I could do, but I wasn't certain, so I decided to go to school public health at Johns Hopkins. And that's a bit of an exploration. It was there where I discovered the fact that healthcare is a field I wanted to pursue for the rest of my life. I learned about the fact that how we want to do things that is going to make the most good for most people. We also understand the fact that in many ways we can make the biggest impact in people's life through public health. And I also realized it was there that in order to pursue public health, studying medicine was important. So going on from school public health, I managed to get accepted to Cornell Medical School, and so I went to medical school and decided to become a surgeon. So I spent 4 years as a surgeon and going through the residency process. At the same time, I started realizing the fact that there's a lot more we can do through IT, through digital health that could transform healthcare. But that was during early days of digital health. Many of the things we're trying to do was not quite ready yet. And so, in fact, I took a year off, went to Harvard and studied medical informatics. But in many ways, I think we were not quite ready. The only thing I was doing there was building electronic medical record for Harvard Mass General's transplantation program. It seems a bit outdated now, but back then that was the most advanced technology we could do. The fact that we could actually build an electronic medical record for a department for one of the best hospitals around the world. So it was a very interesting experience, but it also made me realize it was very difficult to make money doing IT for healthcare.
All right. Yes. So you subsequently decided to pursue an MBA at University of Pennsylvania's Wharton School.
Right.
And so, you know, Dr. Fang, looking at your academic, you know, journey, you could call it that way. I don't think, like you said, nobody could have, you know, foreseen that was, you know, going to happen. You probably didn't, you know, plan it. But didn't you have some concern over the fact that maybe people looking at your resume and thinking that you've done some very impressive academic degrees, you know, from some of the top leading universities in, you know, the United States. But people were, you know, were you a little concerned that people, you know, may be unsure about what exactly that you wanted to do with your career, with your life? Because you're moving from one extreme almost to the other, you know, and then you study a lot of years in school, but you know, probably not doing what you have learned, for example, from Cornell as a surgeon. Like you mentioned, you don't operate anymore, do you?
No, I don't operate anymore.
Right. So, I mean, did you ever have any concern about that?
When I look back at my academic and professional career, I don't think I would have done it any differently. The point is that you can plan your life and knowing the fact that all the dots are going to connect. But at the end, it always does. And the beauty of my experience that it all come together right now. Although I'm no longer a professional musician, what I learned in music taught me persistence, perseverance, competitiveness. I was able to use that throughout the rest of my life. Public health taught me how to run clinical trials, how to think systematically. Because I actually went to school public health first, I was able to conduct many clinical research in medical school, which led me to the next step, that I was able to be recruited by a top-notch biotech firm in Cambridge, Massachusetts, which consequently did very well. It's called Idenix Pharmaceuticals. Developed the hepatitis B and hepatitis C drug. And from there, that I was able to go through a natural progression to Johnson & Johnson, which is the largest, one of the largest healthcare company. And being able to put all my learnings together now, coming back to the digital health age now, where we have to be innovative, we have to be able to think outside the box, we have to be creative, we have to work across discipline. I find myself being in a unique position to do that and put everything together, especially for Taiwan.
Good for you, yes. Well, Dr. Fang, let me ask you, I mean, in the year 2011, you were awarded, selected as an Eisenhower Fellow. And then that was the year that you spent at Harvard and MIT, is that correct?
No,
that wasn't, right?
Yeah, that was, Harvard and MIT was 2001, much 2001, yes.
Well, let me ask you, I mean, what was, you know, the fellowship, you know, I mean, how did it change your life and perspective? And you had a year going through different positions and assignments. How did it help with your subsequent career development?
Well, Eisenhower Fellowships was founded in 1954 to honor President Dwight Eisenhower. The objective at the time was to connect all the leaders around the world to help them understand the U.S. better. Remember, back then, that was during the Cold War. Many of the countries did not trust United States. I was fortunate to be selected as a U.S. Fellow in 2011. I would say it was one of the most transformative experiences in my life. The tagline for Eisenhower Fellowships is that leaders bettering the world around us. We have approximately 2,000 fellows now around the world. On average, it's like one fellow from each country per cohort. the international fellows get to spend 7 to 8 weeks in the U.S. But as a U.S. fellow, we had an opportunity to pick a region of our choice to travel for 6 or 7 weeks. I myself selected to come to Asia. Actually, I visited Taiwan, mainland China, Hong Kong, and Singapore.
Okay.
And the interesting thing about these 4 places is that these are 4 regions with, they are mainly Chinese, 4 regions which has excelled economically, but in a very different way. So I wanted to study how each one of these places trains future leaders, how it became exceptional economically, and how it plans to continue its growth in the future. And it was an amazing experience because I got to meet people I would never have met on my own. On top of that, we were able to continue these fellowship and network or friendship. So it was an absolutely amazing experience. And on top of that, Taiwan has an amazingly strong Eisenhower Fellowship network here. Yes. And so it's a great pleasure to be selected as a fellow.
Okay. And we have about 1 minute left in this part of the program. Then, Dr. Fang, would you tell us then, given all your academic training and the experience with the Eisenhower Fellowship, how did you, how were you able to combine all of them, all these academic training experiences together in terms of furthering your career development?
Certainly. I was fortunate to be one of the few people who was trained in medicine, who started my career in biotech, was successful in bringing a drug to registration and on market, and then switched to medical technology and medical devices, working for Johnson & Johnson, and now being in a position where I'm able to help startups and new companies in Asia become global. I find myself in a unique position now, bringing all my prior experience, both working from one of venture-backed startup all the way to a largest healthcare company, to now being in Asia, looking at how people are trying to jumpstart biomedical industry, in biotech, in medical devices, in digital health, that I find myself now in a position where I, number one, could advise startups, number two, help large IT companies, and number three, I'm in a position to help advise different governments in terms of how they should construct their policy, in terms of bringing together all the different factors, all the different stakeholders to really start a new industry for different countries in Asia Pacific. And so it's a tremendous opportunity.
Terrific. Dr. Fang, you recently set up MEDx Life, and would you mind sharing with us what was the reason to set up the the company, and also what are some of the missions that you had in mind in setting up MEDx Life?
The objective of MEDx Life is to train and cultivate future leaders in medtech startups. We decided to call it MEDx Live, L-I-V-E, which stands for Leadership, Innovation, and Value. We believe that in order to be a good entrepreneur, one needs to be a good leader, but also needs to be very innovative. And lastly, but perhaps most importantly, need to be able to create value. What we find, I mean, throughout my last 1.5 years in Taiwan is that there's no lack of technology in Taiwan. In fact, there's abundance of technology, but the challenge is that we didn't have enough CEO talent for biotech and medtech companies. So what I will find is that I will meet with a startup, early stage startup company. There will be 5 people, but there will be 5 engineers, all male, none of which has any business experience, and all of them are engineers with expertise in some type of technology. So they spend 99% of their time thinking about technology and 1% of their time thinking about business. But in fact, what we know is that in order for a business to be successful, technology is probably less than 10% of value. Remainder of value is created by execution, business model, pricing strategy, and it's everything else. And that's why I realized it was important to create a program that will allow young entrepreneurs to go through the training required to be a good CEO. Okay. And that's why we founded the program.
Okay. And so it is a program for people who would like to be involved in the engineering, biotechnology fields in the future, and you want to train them, giving them some courses and programs so they can easily master the two areas and combining them together. Is that correct?
Well, it is a little more than that. When we decided to set up this program, we decided from the very beginning that we want to be different than any other course in Taiwan. So first, it's a class or it's a course that's completely project-based. There's absolutely no lecture. It's learning by doing, and everything we do is project-based. So, for example, instead of teaching them how to write a problem statement and telling them what it is, we literally threw out a case and said, write a problem statement without telling them anything. And lastly, what's very important is we teach them how to make decisions under pressure. So throughout the class, they're always under pressure. I will never give them enough time to complete a task. And that is done on purpose because I believe a good CEO always making decisions under pressure. So the ability to make good decisions under pressure is critical for a good CEO. So I want them to feel what that's like in a classroom setting where I'm asking them to come up with a team name in 5 minutes, asking them to come up with a business model in 3 minutes with people they never met before. They have learned to work together. I'm asking them to do an investment project, making decisions to make an investment in less than 24 hours. All these things are to simulate real-life experience where they understand what an entrepreneur and a CEO experience through a real-life startup.
Well, let me ask you, you are now, in Taiwan until June. You've been giving some seminars and lectures to people in Taiwan. What do you tell them, to the people that you're speaking to? Do you tell them about your experiences or what you have discovered elsewhere around the world? What do you tell them?
Well, so we have done these courses twice now. And we did one 2015 and one 2016. It's 4 classes, 4 Saturdays, 4 hours each. And where we, learn about each class is held at different location. And first class is in a coffee house. Second class is in an incubator. The third class we have it at a library. And the last class we have at the auditorium is a demo day where every team has to compete for $50,000 NT and for the top prize. The idea is that we want them to live through the entire cycle of a startup within a month. And so they know what's it like. And the idea of having it 4 different places is the fact that, number one, I want them to get outside of the classroom. But then it's a natural progression, right? You meet with your potential partners at the coffee house, and they were forced to form a team on their own with people they never met before. I gave them 5 minutes, and then they find their own teammate. Next thing, they go to an incubator. They get an idea of what's it like to incubate an idea. And then they go to a library because they need to study. They need to find information. And lastly, it's showtime. They need to get in front of people. They need to pitch it to potential investors. So everyone's asked, every team's asked to pitch to a panel of judges like a venture capitalist that would, in terms of probability, that they would invest in your project. So it's a course and a program in a way where not only do we train young students and professionals to become executives in the future, but we give them a platform to continue as a group of students and colleagues to become entrepreneurs in the future.
All right. And Dr. Fang, what's the response from the people who attend the classes? Do they enjoy it, and do they give you any feedback?
Well, I would like to think that we're doing something unique, and certainly so far our students have reflected very positively. There are many different things we're doing that is new. For instance, every class we have a surprise guest come for fireside chat. And we're fortunate that we've been able to invite people such as Acer founder, Mr. Stan Shi, KK Box founder, Mr. Chris Lin, College founder, Mr. Zhang Fang, world-renowned dancer Xu Fangyi to be our surprise guest. So I don't tell them who's coming ahead of time. They don't find out until 12 p.m. that day, until the surprise guest walks through the door. That there's their surprise guest. That's only the first surprise, because the second surprise I give them is that, in fact, it's not a fireside chat between myself and the guests, but I actually ask every single student to come up and ask our guests one question. So when Mr. Stanshi came, he answered 30 students' questions one-on-one. Every student got to come up, sat next to him, and asked him a question. And that's a unique experience for them. And
given the fact that you have been doing these courses for 2 years, 2015 once, and then 2016, what are some of the other programs? Maybe it's in the planning stages, or maybe you have already done them, and then that you plan to do in Taiwan or elsewhere.
So I strongly believe that in order to be successful in medical technology, digital health, that number one, we need better opportunities for our young student and professional. But I believe a foundry model in many ways may work a lot better than an incubator, because the fact that in an incubator model, we're waiting for teams that's already formed to come through an incubation program in many ways, that you count on the fact that there's enough of mature startups to go through your program. But I find that in order to jumpstart a new program, we may need to go one step earlier, which is a foundry model, which means that you have someone fairly strong as a mentor that work together with a group of young professionals to come up with new ideas. That's number one. Number two, I believe these type of program needs to globally linked. It's very hard for us to form an incubator or a foundry in Taiwan alone and expect us to come up with something very innovative. So that is what we're looking to do next.
All right. And given the fact that you have done, some programs in Taiwan, and any other chances of doing similar type of training elsewhere? Maybe, like you said, the countries that you have visited in Asia, China, maybe in Hong Kong, Singapore, even Japan and Korea. Any plans?
Well, yes, I work a lot in Singapore.
Good.
And so it's been a lot of interest in running similar type of
But you haven't done
in Singapore.
the courses in Singapore yet?
No, I have not. I've only ran 2 classes in Taipei. And there's a plan to run it in Tainan, and then there's significant interest to run there. There's also significant interest to run these classes in Singapore. But what I would say, though, what I find what's unique about Taiwan is that the young professionals here are actually extremely entrepreneurial. Compared to a lot of other parts in Asia. I find students in China and Taiwan are extremely entrepreneurial, number one. Number two, I find Taiwan a unique situation because we've had experience creating global brand, such as Acer, such as HTC, such as ASUS. That's unique for a small country like Taiwan as compared to Singapore, for example, right? They don't have such an experience. And then Korea, obviously, with Samsung has a similar experience. So we're in a unique position to do something great in digital health, and we should capture on that fact.
Take it one step further.
Yes.
We need to take when we're talking about biotechnology, talking about healthcare industry. Let me ask you this: as I said at the very beginning of the program, what is digital healthcare?
I believe digital health is future of healthcare.
Okay.
Digital health is really an umbrella term for all things digital.
Okay.
So,
for example,
if you think about everything we do in our everyday lives, anything from cell phone, internet, connectivities, wearables, cloud, it's everything you can think of except in healthcare.
All right.
Right? So the thing about that is the fact that consumer electronics is always ahead of healthcare for several reasons. Number one, there's regulation involves healthcare products.
Okay.
And the medical industry is by nature very conservative.
Yes.
So typically it's a late adapter. So as you can see where smartphones, Internet of Things, cloud-based computing has already dominated our everyday life, that really hasn't taken place in healthcare.
Okay.
So I believe digital health is really the future of healthcare.
Okay.
That certainly a lot of people are making a lot of investments in biotech, which very large investments for a very long time, right? Typically, we're talking about hundreds of millions of dollars for 10 years and longer. And medical devices, a lesser degree, but similarly requires very experienced engineers, a very focused area, and a lot of engineering expertise. But digital health, on the other hand, is much lower barrier of entry, but at the same time, has much greater potential for impact. And that's why I believe digital health will be future for healthcare.
Okay. And based on your personal assessment, what is the state of Taiwan's biomedical industry? We recently had some controversy surrounding biotechnology companies in Taiwan. But put that aside, what is your view about the state of the industry development in biomedicine? Please.
Taiwan could enter that industry, but we need to do it in a very organized fashion. And then we see a lot of growth in the private sector, certainly, especially in the equity market. There's been a lot of growth, but we have to be careful about equating that to creating true value, right? Because until you have successfully developed a compound and able to gain registration rights and able to get the rights to market globally, such as in US FDA, the EMEA, and Japan PMDA, really have created value. So a lot of this right now is still in the works. On the other hand, medical devices, people have talked about for a long time, but I also want to make a distinction between medical equipment, medical devices. That I was formerly at Johnson & Johnson for 8 years. We focus on what we call advanced medical devices, which is what we call class 3 devices. Those things are devices we tend to implant in people. And those are the devices also have much higher value in the sense that they have much higher gross margin, much higher net margin, very different than what we call medical equipment, such as wheelchair, hospital bed, hospital operating room lights. Not that there's no value there, but it's a much lower margin business. And so then now let's talk about digital health. Right. Taiwan has a very strong foundation of manufacturing in the IT sector. So if we talk about manufacturing, probably it's #1 in the world. It's also places where it has a very favorable labor market from investment point of view that we could hire a large number of software engineers for very reasonable cost structure. And lastly, Taiwan is actually very favorable in terms of geographic location. That it get to almost anywhere in Asia within 3 to 4 hours. It's most centrally located, most centrally located countries in Asia. So I think that Taiwan has a lot of advantage.
Okay.
And so how do we capitalize on that, enter digital health, and be able to globalize on our product will be the key.
All right. And as you said, Dr. Fang, that Taiwan has a very solid IT industry as a foundation. So maybe there are a number of, large or, soon to be large IT companies who are also thinking of possibly devoting some resources and branching out into the biomedical field. Do you think that such a transformation will be, successful in large measures, or what will be some of the major challenges for some of the Taiwan IT companies to make in order to make sure that transformation or that branching out into biomedical field will be a successful one?
For years, we built Taiwan, being able to create a very large industry based on its manufacturing capability. To this date, the largest IT companies are Taiwan Semiconductor, Acer, HTC. So making that transformation is essential, but the question, how do we do that? I think that we can look at some examples in U.S. where, number one, all of the major IT companies now are actually significantly invested in healthcare, such as IBM, Dell, HP, Google. So I think 10 years ago, one could question that, what do we need to enter? We don't necessarily have to enter healthcare. I think it's the other way around now, where I don't think you can afford to not enter healthcare. Just look at the global trend. So that's number one. Number two is, how do we transform from a business that's mainly manufacturing based to one that's mainly service based? If you look at the fact that we dominated in the PC and notebook era, but then we didn't really catch the wave of Internet of Things, and we sort of miss out on social media as well too. So essentially, we need to skip all those and jump right into the next big thing in digital health and see what we can do. And we're uniquely positioned doing that because our digital health also requires wearables, connectivity. So we need to be able to produce those hardware at a very reasonable cost. But that is not where we'll make most of the money, right? And where we need to be able to connect all those wearables together, have the right software behind it, have the right artificial intelligence, have the right cloud capability to connect everything together. But lastly, we need to find a way to monetize all those services and all this connectivity through services, through data, through big data computing analytics. And so that's the challenge.
All right. And finally, we have an aging population issue in Taiwan. It's a challenge.
Yes.
All right. And then how can then digital healthcare help Taiwan and other countries as well in terms of managing the aging population?
Right. Well, aging population is not a unique problem in Taiwan. It's a global issue.
Yes.
And everyone talks about how we could use our digital health capability to help aging population. I mean, I think on the outside, it appears to be simple, right? Because there's telemedicine, there's remote monitoring, there's artificial intelligence we can put behind it. And we can't get away from the fact that there will soon be more elderly population than the providers, right? And so there will be a lot fewer providers than people who need to be careful. So how do we do that? Unless we can come up with a system that increases efficiency, decreases the error, we're going to have a problem. So people are looking into telemedicine, robotics, artificial intelligence, wearables, remote monitoring. But I think the challenge is that everyone seems to look at that in a fragmented way. So in order to be successful, I think we have to put all that together, integrate it into a solution, like one single solution, not just telemedicine or just remote monitoring, just some type of wearables, just some type of artificial intelligence that measures certain metrics at home.
Right.
Now, it needs to be a whole package in order for that whole thing to make sense for the government or the private insurer.
All right. Finally, Dr. Fang, how many people in Taiwan that you have talked to actually share the same or similar ideas as to how we can integrate the different aspects of IT industry development in Taiwan now that we're moving to biomedical field? How many people actually, what's the percentage? You know, half the people you talk to or more or less?
Well, I think it's polarized in a sense that most of the younger students and young professionals I speak to can really echo what I'm talking about.
Identify with you.
Identify with me. And they understand the fact that, of course, you know, it's something they grew up with.
That's the future. Yes.
That's the future. And it's also something they feel like they can do. Because if I tell them right now to start a biotech company, they know it's virtually impossible. They don't have the money, they don't have the skill set. It's a non-starter. So what could they do? They go find a big company they work for. They work for a big pharma. They work for multinational. It's not possible. But if I tell them to start a digital health company, they can actually see it and realize that it could actually be a reality. So that's number one. Then I have another group of people who are what I call visionaries, people who've been through this, such as Acer founder Mr. Stan Shi, among others, who really sees the fact that in order to transform Taiwan's IT industry, in order to transform Taiwan's economy, we need to take a drastic different step. And there are only so many new industries we can go into that hasn't completely been
preoccupied by
others. And it's not matured, right? And digital health is one of few which we actually have a competitive advantage in many different ways, and we could win in this industry.
All right. Well, Dr. Fang, thank you for sharing some of your thoughts and observations with us throughout the interview today. But as we enter into the final part of the program today, I want to ask you, you know, China is a huge market, you know, with 1.3 billion people. I mean, a lot of people think of it as the, you know, the future of healthcare, of biomedical industry. But the fact is, a lot of the, you know, Taiwan's small size and medium size, you know, healthcare companies do not wish to venture into China and provide some consultations based on their expertise or experiences to their Chinese counterpart. Primarily because of concerns over IPR, intellectual property rights, and also over proprietary technologies, you know. And what is your view? Because you traveled to China as well, and you also see the potential, the market potential in China. But what is your view about some of these very, you know, serious concerns for some of the Taiwanese firms?
Well, I think it's a great question. I spent a lot of time in China.
Yes.
As the first thing I would say is China is a different market. It's a lot of opportunities, but you need to go in with your eyes wide open. And I think the mistake we tend to make is that because we play with a different sets of rules everywhere else, free market, and we assume that, well, we're going to take that same gamesmanship, we're going to China. If we fail, it's their fault. And in fact, I think it's the other way around, right? It's a big market with a lot of opportunities. You know, going in, that's the situation. If you're not prepared, don't go in. But if you want to go in, understand the fact that it's a different game. So don't take, it's like, you know, they're playing, you know, tennis, but you want to play racquetball and you go in there and it doesn't work, right? And so you need to know it's a different game, different rules, a different dynamic. It's not a complete free market. So the dynamics are different. Especially in healthcare, I would like to remind everyone, I tell many of my friends in the IT industry when going to healthcare, is the biggest difference between IT and healthcare is that one of them is free market. You make a very good product with reasonable price, you put it out there, you'll sell its own. Healthcare is a highly regulated market. Most of the time, it's a monopoly.
Yes.
I'm selling to one person. Maybe selling to just the government, one person in the hospital, and the head of the entire hospital chain. So I'm not interested in selling to not even every single physician. I'm selling to one person. So that is tremendous difference in market dynamic. And China is even more so on the other extreme. So understanding that is critical. But be mindful of that it is also a great opportunity. Right? So what I would say is that you need to partner, but you need to partner with the right people in order to be successful in China.
All right. But do you think some of these concerns over IPR and over proprietary technologies is actually being, improved upon? I mean, the situation is getting better in China, especially in the biomedical field.
I actually don't think it's improved, but what I would say is that that whole market dynamic of the fact that you have IP protection when it doesn't work in China, number one. Number two, I always tell people that IP is not a barrier to entry. It only gives you the right to sue.
Of course.
People can always copy. They dare you to sue them. In fact, sometimes they will infringe on purpose and see if you sue them. So if you're a small company, you're actually out of luck because you don't have the resource to sue them, right? So we need to understand, number one, what IP actually is. But secondarily, though, I always tell people too, you just assume you'll be copied, right? It doesn't matter how good your technology is. Even iPhone, look at what happened when iPhone first came out. Now look at how many people are making smartphone. And J&J was the first company to come up with a drug-eluting stent, the coronary stent. Look how sophisticated that technology was. Look at how many people are making that. And we actually divested from that business. So what I would tell people is that it doesn't really matter how sophisticated your technology is, that you'll always be copied. So you assume you'll be copied, assume there'll be 5 other competitors out there. How are you still able to compete? That's important. Right.
And Dr. Fang, you mentioned that the biomedical field is a highly regulated industry, of course. Then, therefore, government policy makes a difference.
Right.
All right. How then, in your personal opinion, how can the government here in Taiwan try to help the industry by promoting biomedical, technologies, products, some of the regulations being loosened up and things? What would be your recommendation? How can the government help?
Well, I think there's several things government could do to really help jumpstart the biomedical industry, especially digital health. But first thing I would say is really actually not specific to biomedical industry is the entire corporate law structure, right? In U.S., we're able to easily construct stock option as the main attraction for employees to join a startup company and able to take much lower wage, but knowing the fact that because stock option, they could one day, if the company is very successful, they'd be rewarded fairly. But that system right now is not very complete in Taiwan. Being able to do that, I think, is very important. Secondarily, I think there needs to be more availability of early stage, C-stage fund. Whenever I say this, people will point the fact out to me, well, look at this fund, that fund, and all that. But the reality is that it's really still not enough of this early stage C-stage fund, which willing to take high risk and invest in very early stage companies with, I think, a fair equity structure, which means that the founding teams still remain to have majority of equities after investment. I think that's important because if they don't own majority of the equity,
there's no incentive.
There's no incentive for them to work hard. And my friend at Sequoia Capital, what he shared with me, that is a partner there, that all of their most successful companies, the founders owned majority of the equity. So it just proved the fact that, in fact, that having the founding team owning majority of share is the best incentive for them to work hard. That's the second thing. And lastly, I think we need to provide the right opportunity and training program for the young professional. Part of the reason why I started MEDx Live, that it's training program that's more comprehensive, not just on technology. I think we have plenty of training program on engineering and technology, but we need a lot more program to train them to be a well-rounded CEO, to be good entrepreneurs.
All right. Finally, Dr. Fang, let me ask you, what is Taiwan's competitive edge in biomedical field, and how can we maintain such an edge?
So getting back to the topic of today's discussion, I believe digital health will be the brightest future for Taiwan's IT industry. I think we're in a unique position to capitalize this field. The fact that we have the best manufacturing in the world, the fact that we have very reasonable labor structure here, the fact that we're geographically in a very centralized location, and the fact that we have experience building global brands such as Acer, HTC, Asus, that we need to capitalize on the existing foundation and build on top of that. And what we also found is that everyone is partnering, including Google, Qualcomm, IBM. No one is doing this alone, right? Google partnered with Johnson & Johnson to form a new company, Verb Medical. Google is partnering with the government. And you see the fact that in digital health, you can't do it alone. You have to partner. And so it's critical that we find the right partner on the global level in order to be successful.
Terrific. And truly being a pleasure to have you on the program today, Dr. Fang. I want to wish you all the best in your personal, professional endeavors in the future. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you for watching our program today. I'll see you next time on MacroView Television. Thank you.